Day 4 of Buffalo Bills training camp practice is in the books, and Keon Coleman was the star of the show.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, welcome in. If you are joining on YouTube, you can tell the normal background is not here. I'm in a hotel room because I was able to attend today's practice. I'll be at Bills practices all week and excited to share my firsthand observations with you. And so I was on the field for the Sunday morning practice, and today will feature all of my top takeaways from taking in that practice. But the star of the show, the big story, is Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman had an outstanding practice on Sunday morning. Several highlight-worthy plays. He had a big win on a vertical route, go ball over Dorian Strong, where he was able to elevate and catch the ball 25, 30 yards down the field from Josh Allen. Had another fade route that he hauled in over Jamarcus Ingram. Also, Josh Allen, the quarterback on that play. One of my favorite reps was him kind of working a deep comeback route, and he was able to make himself available between Tre'Davious White, who was the corner, and then the safety. I don't know if it was if it was Taylor Rapp or Cole Bishop as the deep safety, but he found a little space in between them on a deep comeback. Josh Allen had a lot of confidence to fit the ball into a tight window, and Keon made the play. And then he also had a short comeback route that he won over Tre'Davious White to haul in another catch. So just felt like the dude was making play after play after play, and felt like Josh Allen had a lot of confidence, giving him some chances to make plays on the ball, which is why you drafted Keon Coleman, right? You have to think Keon Coleman is not a do-everything wide receiver, but he does have areas where he can help an offense, and the onus is on the Bills to put him in those positions and give him chances to make plays, and it certainly felt like he was in those spots on Sunday morning, and Josh Allen had a lot of confidence delivering him the football. And so comfortably the most dynamic player on the field on Sunday was Keon Coleman. And it's been an up and down camp for Keon Coleman. You've heard about some drops. You've heard about some separation issues. And that's probably all true. But for Sunday, he was really, really dynamic and had a lot of confidence in what he was doing on the field. Other wide receiver notes, Curtis Samuel missed practice on Sunday with a hamstring injury, and that just feels like par for the course, where he's just missing time, right? That's kind of been the story of his career. It was the story of his first season in Buffalo. And I was really anxious to see Curtis Samuel and see the role that maybe the Bills had in mind for him, but he didn't practice on Sunday, which created some opportunities. And the Bills worked in a lot of different wide receivers, but the guy that felt like was the biggest beneficiary of Curtis Samuel not being available was Tyrell Shavers. The dude got tons of first-team reps, whether that was 7-on-7s or full-team reps. He was on the field in those 11 personnel groupings with consistency. And now the primary 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver set for the Bills was Josh Palmer, Keon Coleman, and Khalil Shakir. But you did see a good amount of Tyrell Shavers sprinkled in. And obviously I've had a lot of conversations with you about the Bills wide receiver depth chart and how the 5 that you perceive of Coleman, Shakir, Palmer, Moore, and Samuel, while there's a lot of appealing attributes of that group from scrimmage, none of them help on special teams. And I've been really receptive to the idea that some other receiver can crash this party because the Bills are going to need some contributions on special teams. And so, that's kind of the calling card for Tyrell Shavers. That's what he was at San Diego State. And he certainly had his opportunities to do that in the National Football League. And you're watching this practice unfold, and he's playing reps on the outside. He's playing in the slot. He's playing those tight alignments, kind of almost an inline alignment that you saw Mac Hollins run quite a bit last year. And he's having a good practice. And then unfortunately, right towards the end, the Bills were working on a 2-point play, and he got injured. And Tyrell Shavers made the catch, and it was over Maxwell Hairston. And Maxwell Hairston kind of continued to go at the ball after the play was over. And that led to Tyrell Shavers kind of having to kind of protect the ball a little bit. And then he just planted weird, and he went down. Looked like a leg injury. He was carted off. The entire team went over and was trying to show support for him. The coaching staff, Terry Pagula, was over there as well. So we don't, as of the recording of the podcast, know the severity of the injury, but it certainly didn't look good based on what happened out there. And it's disappointing because it felt like he was a big-time riser last year during camp, didn't quite make the roster, but still the Bills maximized his practice squad call-ups last year. And I thought he had a chance to crash the party this year, and maybe that's Jalen Virgil, but I'm fearful for what the diagnosis of that injury is going to be. But I think the point to make, obviously it might not be Tyrell Shavers, but I think we need to be mindful of this wide receiver depth chart not being the 5 players that I think most perceive it to be. The Bills are working in a lot of different players with the first team. I saw Steven Gosnell got a first team rep on Sunday. The guy that didn't get a lot of first team reps, if any, Elijah Moore. And I love Elijah Moore. I love the skill set, and I think we've seen a lot of good video of him and separation. But on Sunday, the dude just didn't get really any reps that I saw with the first team offense. And so, obviously this is one data point. It's one practice. There's a lot of practices. There's an entire preseason left to go. But in sharing my observations today, it didn't feel like Elijah Moore was a big part of the equation for this Bills offense, which is especially concerning when you consider that Curtis Samuel didn't practice on Sunday. And the guy that was getting the reps mostly felt like it was Tyrell Shavers. But I will say the 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver sets, Josh Shakir and Keon Coleman was absolutely the star of Sunday's practice. All right, coming up next, I want to get into some linebacker notes, including Shaq Thompson, who is not going to go quietly here in this race. So we'll break that down and a whole lot more. So folks, be sure to stick with me. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions that we live for. This year, as always, I am playing on Yahoo Fantasy. That's where it's all going down, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran that's participating in your 1 millionth league. I've been using Yahoo Fantasy for years, and I love how smooth the draft day experience is, and the message boards are awesome. The Smack Talk hits just a little different in those Yahoo Fantasy message boards. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. That's all going to begin on August 4th. So stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this the best fantasy season ever. All right, folks, welcome back. Wide receiver heavy to start today's conversation. And look, the Bills were just in helmets. And I want to talk trenches, but what can you really say about guys that aren't in pads in the trenches? I'll certainly have some comments, but, a lot of my attention was focused on DBs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, players that it's a little less consequential for them to not have their full pads on, which I think the Bills will be in full pads on Monday, which will be a lot of fun to take that in. Stuff because Terrell Bernard missed Sunday's practice with a hamstring injury. Not sure of the severity, but his absence in the lineup, plus Dorian Williams, right, who's kind of the third linebacker, he missed with a calf. He's missed the last couple of practices with a calf. It's created some different opportunities for other guys to step in. You saw Shaq Thompson get plenty of first-team reps. In fact, the first-team rep today was Shaq Thompson on the field. Joe Andreessen got a bunch of first-team reps. Balin Spector got a bunch of first-team reps. So those guys were really mixed in quite a bit. And I thought the guy that really popped for me was Shaq Thompson. Made some really good plays in coverage. Had a big-time pass breakup where he was able to elevate. And that's one of the best things about Shaq Thompson relative to his career. You know, a guy that's extremely athletic. At Washington, he played linebacker, but he also was a running back. And he's a good coverage player, has been a good coverage player in the NFL. Now, obviously, wrong up and kind to him when it comes to injuries. And, you know, he's a bit of a wild card. But in this practice, he got a lot of opportunity. He made some really nice plays. You know, that's kind of a couple of times now where Shaq Thompson has been a player that's popped, and especially in coverage. And so I think we got to take Shaq Thompson pretty seriously here for this roster puzzle, in addition to, you know, Joe Andreessen, who I think is pretty firm. But the guy that feels like is lost in the shuffle right now is Edefwan Ula, 5th-round draft pick from 2024. Bernard without Williams and Thompson, Spector, and Lafosio just doesn't seem to have much or didn't seem to have much opportunity on Sunday. And so obviously, again, one data point, lot to play out, but I couldn't help but notice how much those other guys were getting work, and, you know, Edefwan Ula-Fosio kind of off to the side. And, you know, I'm out. Not only which players, but how many. I'd love for the Bills to keep 5. They've traditionally kept 6. If you keep 5, that's going to give you an opportunity to go a little bit heavier in the defensive backfield, where I think the Bills have some very, very challenging decisions, maybe even up front for the defensive line. So I'd love for this to be a depth chart of 5, but I think you need to start taking Shaq Thompson really, really seriously as a guy that can make this roster. And we know that he was a first-round pick under McDermott back in Carolina. Brandon Beane, part of that front office. He's familiar with Al Holcomb, coached Shaq in Carolina. So take him seriously. I'd encourage that. One of the themes of watching the Bills defense on Sunday was emphasis on pressure, 5-man pressures, a lot of 5-man pressures, which I think is Ryan Nielsen's fingerprints are forming on this defense. Nielsen, kind of an up-and-coming coach, did a great job with the Saints defensive line, was their coordinator, was the Falcons coordinator, was the Jaguars coordinator last year. And the results haven't always been great, but he's, for the last several years, been widely considered one of the more up-and-coming defensive minds. And now he's part of this coaching staff, and you can just kind of sense that he has an impact here. He's has an influence. And the 5-man pressure looks that the Bills defense was sending at the Bills offense was pretty telling. You saw slot corners blitzing. You saw linebackers blitzing quite a bit. And, you know, Taron Johnson had a veteran rest day on Sunday. He was still out there. He didn't have his helmet on, but, you know, he was engaged, but, you know, didn't practice in full. And, of course, that meant Cam Lewis got the slot. And the next player that got slot reps was Brandon Codrington. And so it feels like Codrington is ahead of not only like Jamarcus Ingram or Jordan Hancock, all the put to Corey Couch as well. It felt like he was the third guy, which, look, if he's going to be the Bills' primary punt returner and kick returner, then he needs to have some pulse to play defense. Is to play in the slot. So Cam Lewis stepping in, he had a really nice would-be sack actually on a pressure blitz off the edge. he had a good day. And then Brandon Codrington was the guy that got the most work after him in the slot, with Taron Johnson not practicing, having a veteran rest day. But you saw the Bills sending Milano quite a bit, and even the other linebackers. So it was a heavy 5-man pressure day for the Bills on defense. Want to comment here on the defensive line rotation and pairings on the edge. Greg Rousseau and AJ Epinesa, they got the first run at defensive end, and you didn't see Joey Bosa get any work at all during 11-on-11. And I think the Bills are being very long. Obviously, we know the story with Bosa has been the injuries, and they're being pretty calculated with how they're using him. I think it's a couple days now where he has not on 11, and it makes me Epinesa is actually going to, and Bosa is going to be more the third guy that comes off the bench on high leverage downs, maybe a bit more than Von Miller did, but I could see AJ Epinesa being an early down snap merchant. Rousseau and then Bosa kind of getting sprinkled in. And then you saw Michael Hoyt worked in. You saw Landon Jackson worked in. You saw Javon Solomon worked in. And I thought Javon Solomon had a standout day. Obviously, a lot of pressure looks and to be able to make the most noise. Really nice work, creating pressure, getting off the ball quick and getting in the backfield. You couldn't help but notice it. Obviously, we'll see what happens when the pads come on, but I thought Javon Solomon was pretty active. Of course, I tried to pay as much attention as I could to Landon Jackson. Again, it's not a padded practice, but I would say he was hard charging and gave great effort. But, without pads on, it's hard to really gauge, what type of impact he's going to have, not only on the practice, but, how that projects kind of big picture. At D tackle, your first group was clearly Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones. Then the second wave was Larry Ogunjobi and Dwayne Carter. And then you saw TJ Sanders and Deion Walker as kind of the third wave. Whenever Sanders wasn't with Walker, you saw him working a lot with Carter. So another indicator here that Carter's going to play the 1, Walker's going to play the 1, Sanders is going to play the 3, but some of those pairings as the pads come on and how they work together and, what type of reps we get with TJ Sanders and Ed Oliver on the field. But for today, it felt like the groups were Oliver and Jones, Ogunjobi and Carter, Sanders and Walker as the primary groups for the defensive tackle position. All right, coming up next, I have a bunch of offensive notes that I want to get into. Some comments on Dalton Kincaid, the running backs. Not a great day for Tyler Bass. Some thoughts on the QB2 battle and the play of the day, which I have yet to discuss. So we got a lot to do here in segment 3. Folks, be sure to stick with me. We've all been there before, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be all about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you could save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Ever wonder what your buy a ticket? Well, the app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises. And speaking of no surprises, with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, and that is something that is guaranteed. All right, folks, let's get back into some offensive notes here. Spencer Brown still out with the back injury. Ryan Vandemark got most of the work on Sunday at right tackle with the first team with him out of the lineup. I thought it was a really good day for Dalton Kincaid. Just quietly just made plays. Probably had in team drills 4 or 5 different catches. None that I saw him targeted and fell incomplete. A couple of nice runaway routes from linebackers. But I thought his best play came on a corner route. Josh launched one down the field between two defenders. The ball was in the air just a little longer than you thought it was going to be. And that allowed Taylor Rapp to kind of close on the ball and then Matt Milano to kind of catch up and get into the catch point. And Dalton Kincaid was able to hang on comfortably through that contact and in a contested situation. So that was an awesome play. It was interesting to watch the running backs. Let me say this about James Cook. Kind of in the very beginning of practice when things are a little bit lighter and guys are moving around, I watched him go up to Terry Pagula and, dap each other up, gave a high five and pleasantries. Didn't look like a man that's mad at everyone in the whole world. I'll tell you that about James Cook. I mean, with Terry Pagula, like I said, seems like they were very cordial towards each other. So one of my favorite plays from James, rollout pass, Josh rolled to his left and scramble drill, and he was working towards the sideline, and Josh fit one in. The refs on the field called it complete. I don't know if it was complete or not, but it was very, very close. But cool to see some involvement in the passing game. And I thought that was a major theme of what I observed on Sunday was a lot of opportunities for the running backs to catch the football. And some of that probably has to do with 5-man pressures and wanting to get the ball out quick. But even when John his eyes down the field, and he was very comfortable into the checkdowns to the backs when necessary. So I love to see the receiving opportunities there for the Bills running backs, because as I've said to you multiple times this offseason, good things happen when the Bills threw the ball to running backs. Last season, when the Bills targeted running backs compared to the rest of the league, when they targeted running backs, the Bills were number one in EPA per pass. They were number one in yards per attempt, number one in passer rating, number one in adjusted net yards per attempt, number one in touchdowns, 20th in attempts, only 74 passing attempts to 20th in attempts. They were third in yards. So it's definitely an area that the Bills can build on from last year, and something that I hope has more volume attached to it this year because the results were so good. And I think, Josh Allen puts so much stress on a defense, right, with his skill set, regardless of what players are on the field with him or not. Josh Allen puts a lot of stress on a defense. And when Josh Allen is able to make the impact that he can as a thrower, that can make the impact that he can as a runner, can stress defenses to account for every blade of the grass on the field. When Josh is willing to just take those throws to the running backs, there's always a lot of space for the Bills offense. So I'm glad at least this practice gives me some belief that it's a bigger part of the menu this year, and it should be, because it's just another layer. And the Bills have three good backs at catching the football, and Ray Davis, James Cook, and Ty Johnson. Speaking of Ty Johnson and Ray Davis, the Bills ran several plays in team drills where they were on the field together, and Ty Johnson actually was playing in the slot, and then would usually go in motion. But there was a lot of two-back stuff with Reggie Gilliam, but you saw Ray Davis and Ty Johnson as a pair on the field a decent amount in this practice. And one of my favorite plays, I can't remember who the quarterback was. You can convince me it was any of them not named Josh Allen. It was not Josh Allen, but Ty Johnson actually on a wheel route, and Shaq Thompson was actually in coverage. It was a beautiful throw and catch for a long completion. So it's kind of cool to see some of those creative wrinkles in this practice. Mike White versus Mitch Trubisky, that's definitely a battle that's happening. Both got second-team reps on Sunday. I think in terms of this practice, I thought Mike White was better. Mitch Trubisky just kind of feels like a tardy processor that doesn't necessarily have good ball placement down the field. Oh, right. Mike White throws a better football than Mitch Trubisky, but Mike White is just a statue, right? With either one, I would say the guy that I like more today playing itself out. Not a good day for Tyler Bass to kick field goals, team drills, and it was field goal. That's when the rain kind of kicked in on Sunday morning. So he was kicking in the rain. I wouldn't say it was very windy, and it was not like not like this is how it went. He made from 33, wide right from 43, wide left from 47. Then he made from 33, was wide left from 50, and then made from 50. So 4 with, a lot of inconsistency in the rain on Sunday. Hey, Jamarcus Ingram. Quarterback it was, I think it might have been Trubisky, but he was targeting Tyrell Shavers on a post route, and it was cover 3. The defense Ingram was the outside receiver or outside care of his deep third responsibility, and when he sees the drives on the ball, the quarterback, when he threw that ball, I bet you that guy was thinking he was going to throw a touchdown. Perfectly timed, undercuts the ball, and has a nice interception. Kind of felt like a momentum swing based on, the picture that you to, okay, Jamarcus Ingram's going to come off his landmark and break across and make the play. It was outstanding. I thought that was the best play. And there were some really good ones, like I talked about early in the practice from Keon Coleman and Kincaid had a big-time catch, the wheel route to Ty Johnson. But the one that really made me go, oh, wow, that was a heck of a play, was that break on the ball by Jamarcus Ingram. All right, folks, hope you enjoyed these firsthand observations. I'll be here all week. So the Bills are practicing Thursday and Friday. I'll be at all of those practices and giving you my observations afterwards. We'll have Bill Squad tomorrow at Jeremy White, Jerry Estrada, Instagram, or excuse me, not Instagram, on YouTube, right after the practice. So right at noon Eastern time, the 3 of us will be live, and that'll be a fun conversation. Jeremy will be at practice as well. So firsthand observations all week here on Locked On Bills. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. Look forward to catching up with you again real soon.